you have the other side of the coin, which is like when I'm like acting or actually directing is like the most fun that I have. You know, you have like the crew, the actors in front of you, and everybody's kind of looking to you to answer the questions of the day, and you go, you know, we should do it like this. And that is like by far the most fun that I can ever have. So that's the validation where, you know, I've only directed a short film once in the last 3 years, but the 3 days we did shooting were like the best, you know.
And is it visceral? Because the interesting thing about that is I often think philosophically, like, it's happiness, man. That's what life's about. It's those moments where you feel like this is fun. I love it. It's not that it's always easy. There's challenges, but it just makes me feel good.
Yeah.
But some people react to that and they're like, that can't be what life's about. That's too superficial, or it can't be about just feeling good and happiness. Kind of back to where we were before about discomfort and all that. But honestly, I always come back to it. Like I'm not going to apologize about the fact that I do want to be happy. I understand I can't always be happy. I understand that there's times where I have to put in work and feel discomfort. But how do you think about that? Like, are you comfortable with that as the guiding light, that it just was fun and it felt good and you were happy? So that's good enough validation?
Well, what you just said is really true. Like, no matter like who you are, no matter what you get, it's always going to like fade away. Like I had all of my closest friends over to my flat and we watched the movie that I just made. And it was like 20 people and they all like for a moment were looking at me and they were like, that guy did something cool, you know? And then like 3 hours later, we're all just hanging out, like chatting and having drinks and stuff. And I was like, that feeling is gone, you know, and I like felt it leave me. And I probably won't get that feeling again for a couple of years, you know? So you can't like go, oh, everything's going to be great. And my life is great because I have these happy moments, because they're incredibly fleeting. They're incredibly like orchestrated. You don't want to like live in a world where you have to like do all these steps to like finally have that like bliss. Me and my girlfriend are like very different, and I think this is a good like analogy, is like I'm pretty much never angry, never excited, never sad, and never like euphoric. So I'm like very baseline and like calm, which has like lots of drawbacks because I don't get to be like emotional a lot of times. Like I'll be like, oh, I don't get that feeling. Whereas like Jill is like incredibly like emotionally like turbulent, but she gets to experience like such big highs. And I look at her like dancing and I'm like, fuck, she's having fun, you know? And like the opposite of true. Like when she's sad, I'm like, how could you get so sad over something so small? Obviously, yeah. Don't want to invalidate.
Do you think one's better? Do you think objectively one is better or worse?
Yeah, they definitely have their pros and cons, because there's moments where like she can't like go forward, or like she'll have to rely on something externally. But then there's times where I'm kind of like on the outside of many things because I'm not connecting with it, like nature or people or like my work. Like I'll be like quite distant. And I'm like, maybe it would be easier and I wouldn't be so in my head if I was more like her. So, but I think, you know, it's good that there's difference. If we were all like homogenous, then it would be a very strange world.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody, I think it was yesterday. I haven't released it yet, but I did a podcast with somebody who talks a lot about highly sensitive people. There's a more technical term for it, but apparently there's like 30% of the population that, for various reasons, are super highly sensitive, and they there's pros and cons that come with that. But he was talking about it from an evolutionary perspective of how like there's a lot of functionality to it, though, that particular trait, because they're able to observe situations and understand problems before they happen and kind of plan for things. And a lot of nurses and doctors and people like that are highly sensitive because they empathize so deeply with people. So I think it goes back to what you're saying, where it's like, for this whole thing to work, society, life, whatever, we need people of all different shapes, sizes, types. So I think that's probably right. There's not an objective better. We kind of need it all to make it work.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, she's a preschool teacher and she's so empathetic. So
yeah.
I probably couldn't do what she's doing.
I couldn't do it either. It made me think, the story I often think of is, and sometimes I worry this makes me sound like an asshole, and maybe I am, I don't know, but I think
I
you'll
don't think
relate
so.
to it is so when I had my son, so 8 years ago, whatever it was now, I'm sure you've heard the stories. People will say like that first moment you hold your child in your arms, like everything changes and you feel different. And I remember doing it and I was like, I don't feel different at all.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love him.
What's
It's
wrong with
great.
me?
I'm excited to have a kid, but I don't feel any of that magic people talk about. And I'm sure sometimes it's bullshit. People just say it because it sounds nice, but I'm sure for some people it's very real. But it made me think of it with your story because that distance that you speak of, like it's just different. We move through the world and interact with the world differently. And for a little while, I would have been like embarrassed to say that because I would have been worried it made me look bad. But I think it's just we are who we are. It doesn't mean I love my son any less. It's just I don't experience that same event the way some other people do, and I think that's cool.